because it's just one more example in the providence of God of revealing Big Eva's hypocrisy. And we all get it wrong, right? We all get things wrong, and we have to backtrack. God humbles us from time to time. But the problem is that I haven't really seen a lot of guys actually take opportunity for humility, right? I'm not seeing guys walking back. So for anybody who's wondering what I'm talking about is, I'm just going to read a little bit here so I don't, so I get the facts right. But basically, during a hearing of the European Union's COVID-19 response, Pfizer's president of international developed markets, Janine Small, admitted that its vaccine had never been tested before its release to the general public on its ability to prevent the transmission of COVID. So Janine Small, she's the president of international developed markets. Under oath, she admitted that the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, had never, not it was under-tested or insufficient, never been tested before its release to the general public in regards to its ability to prevent the transmission of COVID. And so if you're wondering, so what are the dots you're connecting here? What's the point you're trying to make? The point is this. I was told, I don't know about you, AD, but I was told that in order to love my neighbor, I needed to get vaxxed. But apparently, the Pfizer vaccine was not tested at all in regards to its ability to love one's neighbor. Right. So what do we do with that? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say this. I am actually surprised that she said it wasn't tested at all for that. Because the thing is, the lie that we knew it was a lie that they did all of the normal testing and all the normal, approvals and everything, because that's what they were saying. They were saying, we did everything we normally do. That's obviously not true, because normally it takes years for something to get approved or whatever. Right. And whether that's right or wrong, that's not really the point. The point is, it wasn't the same approvals. That was a lie we kept getting. But I am a little bit surprised that it was so blatantly. We didn't even test it. You know what I mean? Because did not the Pfizer CEO say at one point that they had like 100% efficiency in stopping transmission? Like, I can't remember. So I don't want to quote that. I don't want to say that, but I seem to remember something like that, and it's like, okay, whatever. So, but here's my thoughts though. I actually don't even care about any of this, because even if it was totally effective at stopping transmission, and it was totally awesome, it was like the greatest vaccine of all time. The love your neighbor thing, it's still inappropriate. It's still not God's law to get the vaccine. So, honestly, this just makes it so much more apparent, so much more obvious. Like you change God's law for a lie, but it wouldn't have been good even if they changed it for something that was true. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it because this puts the egg on their face even that much more.
Right. Exactly. So, so I guess his name's Rob Roos, Roos is his last name, but he's an EU parliamentarian. Rob Roos. He's the guy who exposed an alleged misinformation. They're saying alleged in this article, but misinformation campaign by Pfizer with the release of his video tweet today. In it, he called the actions criminal, scandalous, and a cheap lie. Her response under oath, and this is a quotation, when he presses her and says, yes or no, did the Pfizer vaccine, was it actually tested in its ability to stop transmission? She said, regarding the question around did we know about stopping immunization before it entered the market? No, Small replied. And then, let's see, she picks back up. She continued, we really had to move at the speed of science, to really understand what is taking place in the market. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I think my problem is just, you're right. Like, it's not in God's law that you got to get vaccinated. But there's so many things with that. God's law does talk about, all right, so there aren't vaccines in the Old Testament, all right? Because I'm just hearing, play the devil's advocate. I'm hearing our, the trolls coming out in the comments already on YouTube, and saying like, well, there are no vaccines. And so, okay, God's law, what we have is we have 10 moral commandments, and then we have civil codes, right? We have case law.
Sure.
Some of the closest examples that I could get to would be like Exodus chapter 21. I could bring it up, but I'll look for it. But basically, Exodus chapter 21 talks about an ox that's accustomed to gore. You know that passage, AD?
Sure.
And it says, like, if you have an ox that's accustomed to gore in the past, let's see, let me find it. The first part of the chapter has to do with slavery. Then it goes to restitution, which I've gotten in trouble with you before talking about slavery. So we'll just stick to oxen on this episode.
Okay. I don't remember that, but hey.
It was the Examining Moscow crew. Remember? I didn't get in trouble because I'm a big deal. They just used me as a pawn to get to Doug Wilson. So they're like, this is the product of Doug Wilson's discipleship.
Now I remember, yes.
and it's like, and the funniest part about it was the only reason they even saw it is because the title of that episode was A Defense of Doug Wilson. And I thought, like, I put myself in Doug Wilson's shoes for a second. I thought, he probably feels like a dad when his like 3-year-old son goes out to defend him. He's like, that's sweet, son. I appreciate the attempt, but you're actually just making it harder. Like I was trying to make a good argument for Doug Wilson, and I just got him in more trouble. But anyways, here it is. So this is Exodus 21, verse 28. It says, when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, right? You don't get to benefit from it. You lose the ox. But the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, which right there means that if they were following the law of God, the ox should have already been stoned if it gored in the past. Sure. So this is a guy who's already broken the law of God. He has an ox that's gored. Somehow he got away and kept the ox. It's been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned but has not kept it in, right? So the owner is responsible for some kind of fence, some kind of barrier to keep the ox in to make sure it doesn't get out. He hasn't kept it in. He's failed in that responsibility, and it gets out and kills a man or a woman. The ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. And so my point is, we got case law, these civil codes in the Old Testament, and they all, pretty much every single one of them, not even pretty much, all of them, we can track back to one or more of the 10 commandments. So I would say the 6th commandment, thou shalt not murder, stated in the positive light would be, thou shalt not do any harm, physical harm to your neighbor, or the positive would be like, thou shalt esteem and defend and protect the sanctity of human life made in the image of God. So we have a moral obligation to protect human life and to not do harm or destruction and certainly murder to our neighbor. And that does affect not just, walking up to our neighbor and stabbing him in the chest with a knife, but that does affect something in regards to like an ox, right? There could be a passive, indirect way of harming my neighbor because there's something that I had knowledge about. I was warned, right? That's key in the text too. If he's been warned. And so it's like, we've been warned there's this virus going around. We've been warned that it's contagious. We've been warned that it is very dangerous and can be deadly for certain groups of people, like the elderly, all those. So I remember when this was like 2 weeks after, COVID broke on the scene. It's still in March of 2020. And this was the text that I was using to think through it. And I was thinking through that and thinking, okay, but are there other ways? I guess my question is, are there other ways of keeping the ox hemmed in? Are there other ways for in the case of the virus, applying that to another case? Are there other ways besides lockdowns, besides a mask, besides a vaccine? Because what's not in the text is it doesn't say you have to build this type of fence out of these materials, this many feet high. No, it's just keeping the ox somehow. And if the ox does get out, so I would feel like the equivalent would be like if someone actually gets the virus and it can be proven in a court of law that it came from you and it resulted in this individual's death and all the, you know what I mean? Like there'd have to be so much to substantiate that you actually had some moral responsibility. And the whole thing that we were pushing back at the time was just saying, number one, we don't think COVID's nearly as bad as people are making it sound. The elderly, there's only a small portion. Yes, people are dying with COVID and some maybe from COVID, but it's one small sliver of the population. These individuals could quarantine, right? While the rest of us live our lives, not foolishly, but live our lives. And so for me, it was way too much to make a biblical argument that you must put this untested, right? It's like, oh, it's been tested, not long term. It hasn't been around long term.
Right.
There's no way to.
Yeah, that was a lie from the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly. So to say you have to put, and then when it went to children, you have to inject an unknown substance without any long-term testing in your own children, or you're a murderer. You're killing grandma. Go ahead.
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, with the oxen, to me, this is a case law that's talking about like sort of like reckless endangerment, like reckless behavior in general. So if you have a dog or an ox, and it's just a violent ox, it's a violent dog, and you choose to not really take care of it, or really, oh, I just love little Sparky, he's a great dog. Like if that's your choice, and then that dog goes and kills someone, that's your responsibility. That's reckless of you. But the thing is, like, people started to try to make existing reckless. Like existing and breathing air became reckless. Right. Going to the store became reckless. Wanting to go see your grandparents became reckless. Yeah, you're right. And you can't do that. That's an abuse of that particular text. And so, if somebody has COVID or some kind of disease or any sickness, and they decide to go to an old folks home and cough on all the elderly, yeah, that's a problem. That's dangerous. That's something that they should be prosecuted for. But if you're just existing and an old person walks past you and somehow catches COVID, it's very different. It's very different.
You're right. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Thanks for sticking around. I've got an important announcement to make. That's the Theonomy and Postmillennialism Conference 2023. May 5th, 6th, and 7th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Theonomy and Postmillennialism. We've got the speakers that we've already had lined up. That's Dr. James White, Dr. Joseph Boot, Dr. Gary DeMar, non-doctor Pastor Joel Webbon. But we also have a bonus speaker, and that is Dale Partridge from Real Christianity. Perhaps you've heard of him. If not, you should start listening to his podcast. It's fantastic. Dale Partridge is going to be joining our team. We're going to have live panels on Friday night and Saturday night where you'll be able to write in questions and get them answered. We're also going to have a catered barbecue, Texas-style barbecue meal on Friday that's a part of your registration fee. All that is covered, so you need to get that. This is how you do it. Go and register right now at rightresponseconference.com. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com. God bless.